The whisper that shook the palace. The morning light filtered through the ancient windows of Windsor Castle with that peculiar English softness that seems to soften even the hardest truths. It was precisely 11 minutes past 9 when the first whispers began to circulate through the palace corridors, carried by staff members whose discretion had been legendary for decades. Something was different today. The air itself seemed charged with anticipation, as though the very stones of the castle knew that history was about to be rewritten once again. Catherine, Princess of Wales, had always possessed an extraordinary ability to keep the world guessing. For months, speculation had run rampant across every corner of the globe. Tabloids had printed endless theories, social media had exploded with speculation, and royal correspondents had filed report after breathless report. Yet the palace had maintained its characteristic silence, that impenetrable wall of discretion that has protected the monarchy for centuries. But on this particular morning, that wall was about to crack open in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Prince William stood in his private study, his fingers drumming against the mahogany desk that had once belonged to his grandmother. The weight of the decision they were about to make pressed heavily upon his shoulders. This was not merely about announcing a name. This was about legacy, about the future of an institution that stretched back over 1,000 years, about honoring the past while embracing an uncertain future. He thought of his mother, Diana, and how she had navigated similar moments with such grace and courage. He thought of his father, now King Charles III, and the expectations that came with every royal announcement. Most of all, he thought of Catherine and their children, the family they had built together against impossible odds. The decision to have a fourth child had not been made lightly. After Prince Louis was born in 2018, the world had assumed their family was complete. 3 children seemed the perfect number, a neat and tidy conclusion to their childbearing years. George, the future king. Charlotte, the princess who had captured hearts worldwide with her confident wave and cheeky personality. Louis, the youngest prince whose facial expressions at royal events had become the stuff of internet legend. The Wales family appeared complete, balanced, content. But life, as Catherine often reminded William during their private moments, rarely follows the script we write for it. The pregnancy announcement had come as a shock to everyone, including some members of the royal family itself. Catherine had wanted to wait, to be absolutely certain, before sharing the news with the world. She had learned from previous experiences that the glare of public scrutiny during pregnancy could be overwhelming, suffocating even. The hyperemesis gravidarum that had plagued her previous pregnancies returned with a vengeance, forcing her to cancel engagements and retreat from public life for several weeks. The press had been merciless in their speculation during those quiet months, with some publications going so far as to suggest marital difficulties or health crises that simply did not exist. But Catherine had endured, as she always did. She had learned the art of royal resilience from the best and the worst examples. She had watched Diana's every move dissected and criticized. She had seen the toll that constant public attention could take on a person's mental health and family life. She had also witnessed the Queen's unwavering commitment to duty, the way Elizabeth II had balanced personal sacrifice with public service for 7 decades. Catherine had taken these lessons and forged her own path, one that prioritized her children's well-being while still honoring her responsibilities to the crown and country. The birth itself had been kept remarkably private, a near impossible feat in the modern age of instant communication and social media saturation. Catherine had delivered at the Lindo wing, as tradition demanded, but the usual fanfare had been deliberately muted. No crowds of photographers camped outside for days. No announcement of labor beginning. Just a simple statement released after the fact, confirming that mother and baby were both healthy and resting comfortably. The baby's sex had been revealed, a daughter, their second princess, but the name had remained a closely guarded secret. Now, standing in rooms that had witnessed centuries of royal history, William and Catherine prepared to share that name with the world. The communications team had been briefed. The official statements had been drafted and redrafted dozens of times. Every word had been weighed and measured for potential interpretations and misinterpretations. This was not merely a personal announcement. This was a statement about the monarchy's future direction, about the values that would guide the next generation of royals, about the balance between honoring tradition and embracing change. The name they had chosen carried profound significance. It was not a decision made hastily or lightly. Weeks of discussion had taken place, not just between William and Catherine, but with King Charles and other senior members of the family. Each potential name had been analyzed for its historical resonance, its public perception, its personal meaning. Some names had been immediately dismissed as too controversial. Others had been set aside as too common or too unusual. The name they ultimately selected represented a bridge between past and present, a tribute to those who came before, while looking forward to those who would come after. The names that built an empire. To understand the significance of any royal name, one must first understand the weight that names carry within the Windsor dynasty. Every name is a message, a declaration of values and priorities, a subtle or not-so-subtle political statement. When Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born in 1926, no one could have predicted she would become the longest reigning monarch in British history. Her names connected her to previous queens and established her place within a lineage that stretched back centuries. When Charles Philip Arthur George was christened, each name carried the weight of royal ancestors and the hopes of a nation recovering from war. The tradition of royal naming had evolved over centuries, shaped by politics, religion, family loyalty, and public opinion. In earlier eras, names were chosen primarily to honor previous monarchs or to cement political alliances between royal houses. Mary and Elizabeth, James and Charles, these names recurred throughout the family tree like a musical refrain, connecting each generation to those that came before. But the 20th century had brought changes to this tradition, as it had brought changes to every aspect of royal life. Diana had broken conventions with her sons' names in ways both subtle and profound. William Arthur Philip Louis represented a departure from the heavy Germanic names that had dominated the family for generations. The choice of William as the first name, rather than relegating it to a middle position, signaled a return to English roots and a conscious distancing from the family's German heritage. When Harry was born, Henry Charles Albert David, the casual use of Harry rather than the formal Henry, suggested a desire for their sons to have some semblance of normalcy, even within the gilded cage of royal life. Catherine and William had continued this evolution with their own children's names. George Alexander Louis honored the king's formal title while including Alexander, a name with no direct royal precedent in recent British history. Charlotte Elizabeth Diana made headlines worldwide for its inclusion of Diana, the first official acknowledgement of William's mother in a royal child's name since her death. The middle name Elizabeth paid tribute to the late Queen, while Charlotte itself harked back to George IV's daughter. Louis Arthur Charles completed the set, honoring Prince Philip's uncle Louis Mountbatten while including Arthur, a name beloved by the British for its legendary associations. Each of these naming decisions had been dissected by experts and amateurs alike. Royal historians had written lengthy articles analyzing the significance of each choice. Bookmakers had taken bets on potential names before each birth, with millions of pounds wagered on everything from traditional choices like Mary and Alice to modern options like Grace and Ivy. The public had invested emotionally in these decisions, feeling a sense of ownership over children they would never meet, but who would one day represent them on the world stage. The pressure to choose correctly was immense. A name deemed too modern might be seen as a rejection of tradition and could alienate conservative supporters of the monarchy. A name too traditional might appear out of touch, a failure to recognize that the institution must evolve to remain relevant. A name that honored one side of the family while neglecting the other could spark accusations of favoritism or disrespect. Every angle had to be considered, every potential criticism anticipated and addressed. William had spent hours in the royal archives, poring over family trees and historical documents. He had consulted with historians and constitutional experts, seeking their input on the appropriateness and significance of various options. Catherine had approached the question from a different angle, considering not just the historical weight, but the practical reality of the name. How would it sound in a playground? Would their daughter be teased or bullied because of it? Could it be shortened to a friendly nickname that she might prefer as she grew older? These parental concerns existed alongside the more formal considerations of royal protocol. The couple had also considered the international implications of their choice. The British monarchy no longer ruled over a vast empire, but it remained the symbolic head of the Commonwealth, a voluntary association of 56 nations spanning every continent. The name they chose would be heard and used by billions of people across vastly different cultures and contexts. It needed to be pronounceable in multiple languages, culturally sensitive, and capable of representing not just Britain, but the diverse Commonwealth that the monarchy now served. There were names that Catherine had loved, but William had vetoed, and vice versa. There were suggestions from family members that had been politely acknowledged and quietly dismissed. King Charles had apparently favored certain traditional options, while Queen Camilla had advocated for something slightly more contemporary. Prince Harry, despite the ongoing tensions within the family, had reportedly sent a private message suggesting a name that held personal significance for both brothers. Princess Anne had characteristically stayed out of the debate, though she had apparently remarked to a friend that whatever they chose would inevitably be criticized by someone. The late Queen Elizabeth had established a precedent for this kind of careful consideration. When she named her children, she had balanced tradition with personal preference, royal duty with maternal instinct. She had understood that names mattered, that they shaped public perception and established expectations that would follow a child throughout their life. Catherine and William had studied her choices, learning from both her successes and the occasional missteps that even the most experienced royals could make. The revelation. The official announcement came through channels that had been carefully orchestrated down to the minute. At precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the Palace Press Office released a statement to the Press Association, following protocol that had been established generations earlier. The words were simple, elegant, and carefully chosen to convey both joy and appropriate gravitas. The Prince and Princess of Wales are delighted to announce that their daughter has been named Rose Alice Diana. 3 names, each carrying layers of meaning that would fuel discussion for weeks to come. The choice of Rose as the first name sent immediate ripples through royal circles and beyond. Unlike the previous children's names, which had clear precedents in recent royal history, Rose represented something different. It was a name that evoked the very symbol of England itself, the Tudor rose that had united warring factions and established a dynasty. It was also deeply personal, a tribute to Catherine's grandmother Rose Asquith, a woman who had shaped Catherine's early years and instilled in her the values of family loyalty and quiet strength that had served her so well in royal life. But Rose carried other resonances too. The name connected the baby princess to Rose Gilman, one of the Queen Mother's closest friends, a woman who had provided unwavering support during the darkest days of the Second World War. It echoed Rose Windsor, a distant cousin whose grace and discretion had made her a beloved figure within the family. The name managed to be both traditional and fresh, familiar, yet distinctive. It avoided the pitfalls of being too common or too unusual, striking that delicate balance that the Wales family had sought throughout their deliberations. Alice, the first middle name, carried equally profound significance. Most obviously, it honored Princess Alice of Battenberg, Prince Philip's mother, a woman whose remarkable life had only recently received the recognition it deserved. Alice had been born deaf, yet she had learned to lip read in multiple languages and had become a formidable presence in European royal circles. During the Nazi occupation of Greece, she had hidden a Jewish family in her palace, risking her own life to save others. She had founded a nursing order and devoted her later years to charitable work. Her courage, compassion, and commitment to service represented exactly the values that William and Catherine hoped to instill in their children. But Alice also reached back further into British royal history. Alice Maud Mary, Queen Victoria's third child, had been one of the most influential royals of her generation, using her position to advance causes she believed in and refusing to be confined by the limited expectations placed on women of her era. The name connected the new princess to this legacy of female royal agency and activism, suggesting that she might follow in the footsteps of ancestors who had pushed boundaries and challenged conventions. Diana, the second middle name, surprised no one yet still managed to be deeply moving. William had already honored his mother with Charlotte's middle name, but the inclusion of Diana in his second daughter's name underscored the enduring significance of the Princess of Wales in his life and legacy. 27 years after her death, Diana remained one of the most beloved and controversial figures in modern British history. Her name conjured images of glamour and tragedy, of revolutionary approaches to royal duty and devastating personal struggles. By naming their daughter Rose Alice Diana, William and Catherine were ensuring that the next generation would carry forward Diana's memory, and they hoped her commitment to using royal privilege to make a genuine difference in people's lives. The public reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. Social media platforms exploded with commentary, analysis, and emotion. Rose began trending worldwide within minutes of the announcement. Florists reported a sudden surge in orders for roses of every variety. Baby name websites crashed under the weight of traffic as expectant parents rushed to add Rose to their own shortlists. The name seemed to capture something that people had been craving, a connection to tradition that still felt contemporary and relevant. Royal correspondents scrambled to provide context and analysis. Television networks interrupted regular programming to discuss the announcement. Experts were trotted out to explain the historical significance of each name component. Some praised the choice as inspired, a perfect blend of honoring the past while looking toward the future. Others critiqued it as playing it too safe, suggesting that William and Catherine had missed an opportunity to make a bolder statement about the monarchy's evolution. A few contrarians argued that any royal naming convention was inherently problematic, a perpetuation of hereditary privilege that had no place in a modern democracy. Within the family, reactions were more private, but no less significant. King Charles released a brief statement expressing his delight at his granddaughter's name, noting that it honored multiple branches of the family tree in a way that spoke to the unity he had long championed. Queen Camilla was photographed leaving Clarence House with a broad smile, though she declined to comment to the waiting press. Prince Harry and Meghan sent a private message of congratulations, a rare moment of communication between the brothers whose relationship had been strained for years. The message remained confidential, but sources suggested it was warm and genuine, focusing on the joy of a new life rather than past disagreements. Princess Anne, true to form, offered a characteristically dry assessment when asked about the name during a public engagement. "It's a perfectly sensible choice," she reportedly said, which from Anne constituted high praise indeed. Prince Edward and Sophie expressed their pleasure at the continuation of the Alice name within the family, given Sophie's own middle name and her close relationship with the late Prince Philip. Even some of the more distant relatives, those who typically avoided public comment on family matters, found themselves drawn into the conversation about what this name might signal about the monarchy's future direction. The meaning behind the message. To understand why Rose Alice Diana represented such a carefully calibrated choice, one must look beyond the individual names to the broader context of the monarchy's current position. The British royal family found itself navigating treacherous waters, caught between competing pressures to modernize and maintain tradition, to be relatable yet maintain mystique, to justify its continued existence in an age of increasing skepticism toward inherited privilege. Every decision, from the clothes they wore to the causes they championed, carried symbolic weight and potential for controversy. The choice to name their daughter Rose, a quintessentially English name with deep roots in national symbolism, could be read as a reassertion of the monarchy's connection to British identity at a time when that identity itself was being questioned and renegotiated. Brexit had fractured the country politically and emotionally. Scotland continued to debate independence. Northern Ireland's peace remained fragile. Wales was asserting its own distinct identity with increasing confidence. The United Kingdom was anything but united, and the monarchy's role as a unifying force had been challenged as never before. Rose, the flower that had symbolized the resolution of civil war and the birth of a new dynasty under Henry VII, represented hope for reconciliation and unity. Whether consciously or not, William and Catherine were invoking that symbolism, suggesting that their family and the institution they represented could still serve as a point of common identity for a fractured nation. It was a bold claim, perhaps even an audacious one, but it was also deeply traditional, reaching back to the very foundations of the Tudor monarchy that had established royal supremacy in England. The inclusion of Alice carried different but equally important messages. By honoring Prince Philip's mother, William was acknowledging his grandfather's profound influence on his life and on the monarchy itself. Philip had been the longest-serving consort in British history, and his death in 2021 had left a void that was still being felt throughout the family. But more than that, Alice represented qualities that the modern monarchy desperately needed to embody: courage in the face of adversity, compassion that translated into concrete action, humility despite privilege, and service that went beyond ceremonial duties. Princess Alice's story of hiding Jewish refugees during the Holocaust had only become widely known in recent years, thanks in part to dramatic portrayals in popular media. Her recognition as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem had elevated her from a footnote in royal history to a figure of genuine moral authority. By invoking her name, William and Catherine were aligning their daughter, and by extension the entire royal family, with values that transcended nationality and religion: basic human decency, moral courage, and the willingness to risk everything for what was right. Diana, of course, remained the most emotionally charged element of the name. 27 years after her death, William's mother continued to cast a long shadow over the royal family. Her legacy was complex and contested. To some, she represented everything good about modern royalty: warmth, accessibility, genuine compassion for the suffering, and a willingness to break outdated protocols. To others, she embodied the dangers of emotional decision-making, media manipulation, and the prioritization of personal feelings over institutional stability. William had spent his entire adult life trying to honor his mother while avoiding her mistakes. He had learned from watching her use media attention to advance her causes, but he had also witnessed how that same media had ultimately consumed her. He had absorbed her lessons about the power of human connection, the importance of showing up for people in their darkest moments, while also recognizing that the institution required certain boundaries and protocols to function effectively. By naming his daughter Rose Alice Diana, he was declaring that Diana's legacy would not be forgotten or diminished, that her contributions to modernizing the monarchy would be acknowledged and built upon. The name also served as a subtle rebuke to those who had sought to erase or minimize Diana's impact. For years after her death, the royal family had seemed almost reluctant to mention her name publicly. Charles had moved on with Camilla. The Queen had maintained a studied neutrality. Only William and Harry had consistently championed her memory, and Harry's departure from royal life had complicated even that tribute. Now, with Rose Alice Diana, William was ensuring that his mother's name would be spoken in royal circles for generations to come, carried by a princess who would represent the future of the monarchy. But names alone could not determine destiny. The true test would come in how Rose was raised, what values she absorbed, what role she would ultimately play in the royal family's evolution. Charlotte had already shown signs of the confidence and charisma that would serve her well in royal life. George, as future king, carried burdens that his siblings would never fully understand. Louis remained young enough that his personality was still emerging. Rose would grow up in their shadows, the fourth child who would never be expected to reign, but who might nevertheless play a crucial role in supporting and shaping the monarchy. Catherine understood this better than anyone. As a fourth child herself, she knew what it meant to exist outside the spotlight while still being shaped by family dynamics and expectations. She had watched her own siblings navigate their paths, finding ways to build meaningful lives without the burden of excessive attention or responsibility. She was determined that Rose would have similar opportunities, that being a princess would not become a prison from which there was no escape. William shared these concerns, but approached them from a different angle. He had seen what happened when royal children were denied normal experiences, when they were so protected and isolated that they became incapable of relating to ordinary people. He had also witnessed the opposite extreme, when too much freedom led to scandals and embarrassments that damaged the monarchy's reputation. Finding the right balance would be the work of years, decades even, requiring constant adjustment and reassessment as Rose grew and the world around her continued to change. A future unwritten. The christening of Princess Rose Alice Diana was held 6 weeks after her birth, following tradition that stretched back centuries. The Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace provided an intimate setting, its ancient walls having witnessed countless royal christenings, including those of her older siblings. The guest list was carefully curated, limited to close family, and a small number of godparents chosen for their personal significance to William and Catherine, rather than their social status or political influence. The photographs released after the ceremony told their own story. Rose, resplendent in the Honiton lace christening gown that had been worn by generations of royal babies, appeared peaceful in her mother's arms. Catherine's smile radiated genuine happiness, a contentment that came from knowing her family was complete. William stood beside her, one hand resting gently on George's shoulder, the other holding Charlotte's hand, while Louis peered curiously at his new sister. It was an image of family unity that the palace hoped would define the Wales household in years to come. But even as the official photographs were released and the commentators praised the event's dignity and grace, questions about Rose's future remained unanswered. What role would she play in the royal family's evolution? How would she navigate the peculiar challenges of being born into privilege while being expected to justify that privilege through service? What causes would she champion? What kind of person would she become? History offered some guidance, but no definitive answers. Princess Anne had forged a remarkable path as the Princess Royal, becoming arguably the hardest-working member of the royal family while maintaining a fierce commitment to privacy and a no-nonsense approach to royal duty. Princess Margaret had chosen a different route, one that brought glamour and excitement, but also scandal and sadness. Lady Louise Windsor and her brother James were showing yet another way forward, living relatively normal lives while still participating in royal events when called upon. Catherine and William had discussed these precedents at length. They knew they could not simply impose a predetermined path on their daughter. Rose would need to discover her own way, guided but not controlled, supported but not suffocated. The key was to instill the right values early, to teach her that privilege came with responsibility, that being a princess was about service rather than status. If they succeeded in that foundational teaching, the rest would follow naturally. The broader question of the monarchy's future hung over these discussions like an invisible presence. Public opinion remained divided on whether Britain needed a royal family at all. Polls showed majority support, particularly among older citizens, but younger generations were increasingly questioning the institution's relevance and value. The Platinum Jubilee celebrations for Queen Elizabeth had demonstrated that there was still genuine affection for the monarchy, but that affection was increasingly focused on specific individuals rather than the institution itself. William and Catherine understood that they represented the monarchy's best hope for continued public support. Their approval ratings consistently outpaced those of other senior royals. Their family appeared stable and loving in ways that resonated with ordinary people. Their children seemed grounded despite their extraordinary circumstances. They had successfully navigated scandals and controversies that might have destroyed less resilient couples. They had shown that it was possible to modernize royal practices without abandoning core traditions. Rose's birth and naming fit into this broader strategy of controlled evolution. By choosing a name that honored multiple aspects of royal history while still feeling contemporary, they were demonstrating that the monarchy could adapt without losing its essential identity. By welcoming a fourth child when many had assumed their family was complete, they were showing that royal families could make personal choices rather than simply following predetermined scripts. By releasing carefully curated but genuine-seeming photographs and information, they were satisfying public interest while maintaining appropriate boundaries. But strategy and calculation could only go so far. Rose was not a chess piece to be moved around a board. She was a human being who would develop her own personality, interests, and desires. She might embrace royal life with enthusiasm or rebel against its constraints. She might become a powerful advocate for important causes or prefer to work behind the scenes. She might remain in Britain or seek opportunities abroad. The name Rose Alice Diana gave her a framework and a legacy, but it could not determine her destiny. As the sun set over Windsor Castle on the evening of Rose's christening, William found himself standing alone in one of the castle's many rooms, cradling his sleeping daughter in his arms. The weight of history pressed down on him, as it had throughout his life. He thought of all the royal children who had been christened in that same gown, all the hopes and fears their parents had harbored for them. Some had lived up to expectations, others had fallen short. Many had simply tried to live their lives with dignity despite impossible pressures. He whispered a promise to his daughter then, one that no one else would ever hear. He promised to protect her as much as any father could. He promised to teach her that her title was both a gift and a responsibility. He promised to show her that true nobility came from character rather than birth. He promised to love her unconditionally, whether she chose to embrace royal life or forge her own path away from it. Most importantly, he promised to let her be herself, whoever that self might turn out to be. Catherine joined him a moment later, slipping her hand into his. They stood together in silence, two people who had somehow found each other across the vast divide that separated her middle-class upbringing from his royal destiny. They had built something real together, something worth protecting and nurturing. Rose was their fourth child, but not their final statement. She was another chapter in an ongoing story, one that would continue long after they were gone. The name Rose Alice Diana would be spoken countless times in the years ahead. It would appear in history books and magazine articles. It would be analyzed by experts and debated by commentators. But none of that mattered as much as the simple fact that this was their daughter, a person whose worth had nothing to do with her title or her place in the line of succession. She was Rose, and that was enough. The revelation of Princess Rose Alice Diana's name marks not an ending, but a beginning. As the Wales family grows, so too does the monarchy's story. What role will this fourth princess play in shaping Britain's future? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: the name she carries will inspire, challenge, and endure for generations to come.